Girls, there's some green chairs up here.
You can see right there.
Are we good? All right. Where to go? Are we good? Mr. Conrad, are we good? Huh? I did, but I believe we're good. Conrad's team, we're good? Okay. Okay. Again, thank you so much for coming and being here, you guys. I really appreciate you. Thank you, teachers, for bringing your classes. I know that it's not the most ideal space. Normally we would be in the auditorium, but there's some cool stuff happening in the auditorium this week as well. This is your reminder, students, to please be respectful. AirPods need to be out, headphones need to be off, cell phones need to be put away. Again, reminder that if cell phones are out, they will be mine for the hour. Okay? Thank you so much. Put them in your pockets, put them in your backpacks. Ms. Barazzoni.
Perfect. Okay, so everybody knows that I'm particularly loud, but I'll use it anyways. Hello, I'm Ms. Barazzoni. I recognize a lot of your faces, and I'm really glad that I get to talk to so many people that I already know. But if you don't know me, I'm one of the English teachers here. Now I know this is like a teacher TED Talk, so the idea of TED Talks is that it's something really big and really profound, and you say something with a lot of meaning. And I kind of have a title that seems to suggest that, right? Like overcoming grief and anxiety and like building resilience. But the truth of the matter is, like, I'm up here telling my personal story, which people have told me is somewhat impactful. That's all I have is like my experience and my story. And as an English teacher, I firmly believe that our narratives and our stories and our experiences have meaning, and the reason that we tell them is that we can connect ourselves to other people and hopefully feel more grounded and less alone, and like we have others in this experience. So I'm just gonna tell my story, and hopefully that resonates with you in some way. So although I usually try my best to come off as very bright and bubbly and sometimes chaotic, I do have a lot of things in my past that have been not the most easy to deal with. And the biggest thing that I talk about and I regularly share with my students is probably one of the most profound experiences that has really kind of shaped me. And it has centers around this date, so 3/28/66. So if you are looking at that date and thinking, but Ms. B, you're too young for that, thank you. But also, this date represents to me, it's my mother's birthday. My mother was born on March 28th of 1966, and my experience with grief, although I kind of had attended some funerals, I lost my grandfather when I was really young, my biggest experience happens and centers around my mom. So you can see us there, just, you know, we can see we're two of the same, two peas in a pod. I have two younger sisters, and neither one of them looks like her. I have my mom's face, and it was really often joked that, you know, I was just my mom's mini-me. You could, I mean, it's quite easy to tell. And then this is a picture of me and my mom and my dad, and believe it or not, this is at my senior prom. And this is also, just about like a month after my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And my mom was diagnosed with a form called triple negative. And I hope that none of you know this, but some of you might. Triple negative is one of the most aggressive forms of breast cancer. And even though she had a mammogram about 6 months before and everything looked really great and everything looked super good, this cancer was really aggressive and it was really fast growing. And so I actually found out when I got home from a band trip, and my parents told me, hey, this is what's going on. They left and they went to a doctor's appointment, and I kind of had to sit with this news. And so my mom began the treatments. She began doing chemotherapy and radiation and all of that stuff. This is just another one. This is actually my mom when she was a lot younger, so obviously the resemblance is quite striking. And my mom, her name is Nancy. She was a really fantastic woman, a really fantastic lady. She made this experience about as good as it could have been for my sisters and I. So what you see here is my mom letting us give her a haircut, which clearly none of us should go into any sort of beauty work. It was terrible, but really fun. She had the wherewithal to turn this moment of like tragedy where we were all grieving, where we were all unsure of our footing, into something that was a moment of joy, right? So my sisters and I are in the bathroom with her, and we are hacking away at her hair with scissors, and we are laughing and joking and talking about how none of us should ever do this, and she's gonna look terrible. But it made this really, really great memory for us. And then afterwards, we buzzed it off, and she had no hair, right? And that didn't necessarily seem to faze her, right? I was 18, and I was about to leave for college, and now I was kind of wrestling with if I should make a choice that was different. And my mom was really adamant that I needed to live my life, that I needed to do the things that were for me. She never made it seem like she was in pain or hurting, because what she wanted was for us to be the people that we were meant to be, which was really, really, really incredible. And so I graduated, and my mom showed up, and I moved into college, and my mom was there, and all was kind of really, really well. And that's my favorite picture. She said that she hated it, but she's not here, so I get to show you. And so she fought for 18 months before she passed away, my sophomore year of college. So she passed away on September 22nd of 2015. And I spent a week away from school. 1 week. I went home on a Monday, she passed on a Tuesday, and I was back at school that Sunday night. And I know that seems probably really strange to some of you. For me, it was good to put myself in a situation where I had like control over things, where I could do something that was normal, that I could immerse myself in like my friends at school or my studies, or something that I knew would focus my attention and energy. And that's one of the things that when you are experiencing trauma, when you are going through something that is really difficult, I sometimes think, not everybody's gonna respond the way that I did, right? Like I lent into what do I have control over, what do I have power to do, and that's what kind of grounded me. And some of us lose control, and that's also okay, and that's also valid. And that's also the second part of my story, which I'm gonna try to speed run through. So a couple more photographs of me and my mom. And then this. So I mentioned earlier, I have two sisters, both of which are younger than me. And even though we grew up in the same house and we were experiencing the same tragedy, my sisters and I did not deal with my mom's passing in the same way. And I kind of turned to my studies, I kind of turned to what I could take control of, and I kind of really relied on that and shut myself into that kind of world and environment. And my youngest sister, Sophia, she chose a different method. And again, I know this surprises probably a lot of people, you wouldn't expect it looking at me, but my youngest sister decided that she was really hurting, and so she started drinking a lot, and she started doing drugs. So she was smoking weed, but also doing things like cocaine and Molly and ketamine, which are super not safe, if I can make that really, really clear. And while all this was happening also, there were times where like my sister had to go to the hospital and have her stomach pumped, and I didn't know this until like years after, because my family didn't want me to worry while I was at school. So on top of this going on, I was also not getting all the information, and I was getting it in like small little packages. And so what you're seeing here is my mom passed in 2015, and then in September, and on October 9th of 2016. My sister Sophia got into a car, and it was our family car. And she got into the car with 4 other people. And she was not driving, but she was in the passenger seat. And her and the other occupants were very drunk, and the car crashed. And this is a picture of her spine that needed 2 rods and 8 screws, because she was injured in this crash, and it also resulted in the coma and eventual death of another passenger in the car. And as a result, so this is my sister, and this was the car. And as a result, you know, we also now dealt with a bunch of legal stuff. So in the interest of time, she is now a convicted felon who served 6 months and 5 years of probation and $10,000 in restitution. And she now lives in Kansas, and she is going to Wichita State University, and she is acing her classes in cybersecurity, and she has her own apartment and a job, and it took years to get there. And I don't say this to scare any of you or anything like that, but as my final kind of points, one, you don't really know what people are experiencing, right? And I know it can be hard to know those types of things about other people, and I want to know and let you know that, like, trauma happens, and we're going to deal with it in different ways, and we can kind of persevere and get through it, right? Find the ways and the methods and the coping strategies that work for you. Find self-compassion for the things that you are going through. You are not alone. There are other people. Sharing your story has incredible meaning and weight to it, because that is the way that you are able to make it through to the other side. So even when these things happen, you are not necessarily by yourself. So I don't want to take up too much time from our other presenters, but if any of this resonated with you or you felt a particular type of way, I'm always happy to share my story and the things that I experienced and how I worked through it. And if there's any way that having a chat might satisfy your interest or help you in any way, please feel free to find me. And also thank you for letting me share my story.
Thanks, Ms. Buttazzoni, for sharing such a personal experience and being able to open our eyes to the fact that we can get over some serious things through a lot of help and self-reflection and continue to work through them. So congrats to her, right? That was a lot of work she's put into her life, right? Can we give her another applause for being able to share that with us? Next up is Ms. Razgunez. She's gonna tell you all the things about her life.
It's Ricky, cool. Hey, so that was a really great presentation. Thank you so much to Ms. Buttazzoni for sharing all that information with us. I'm gonna switch gears to a new topic, and I'm gonna share about my journey of discovering my autism and also share some information about autism with you. So, I shared this, I included this video just to have a brief glimpse at some autistic joy, and I think the funniest part, so first you noticed me ziplining, but if you look under the trampoline, did anybody catch what was happening underneath the trampoline? Okay, I'm gonna show it again. Okay, look under the trampoline this time. Okay. Do you see those kids under there? They are currently covering themselves with mud. So everybody is playing and having fun in their own way in that picture. So a little bit of information about me. My name is Rachel Razgunez. I'm a speech therapist here in the building. I have a master's degree from Wayne State University. I went to the University of Michigan for my undergrad. Like I said, I'm a late diagnosed autistic person. I have 3 kids. I've been doing my job for 17 years, and I'm a strong believer in community and mutual aid. We can't get through life on our own. We need each other. Real quick, just a couple definitions. So ableism is defined as a form of bias against those in the disabled community. The belief that those who are disabled or who have disabilities are less than due to their disabilities. Another definition that's really important when we think about acceptance and disability is the double empathy problem. So this is something that I loved finding out about. The double empathy problem is that researchers have found that autistic people communicate just fine with other autistic people, and that non-autistic people communicate better with non-autistic people. So then you have to think, is this a disability or is it a difference? Or is it a disability because we live in a world that's not created for autistic people? Mutual coexistence, where different neurotypes are valued and work and play collaboratively, is the goal. Awareness is the knowledge, acceptance is the practice of celebrating and loving the differences. We all have something unique to bring to the table. So be curious and playful. The key to true understanding, connection, and feelings of belonging could sometimes be as simple as approaching from a place of curiosity instead of a place of judgment. So this is a recent hiking trip I went on, and I'm just being curious and exploring from the heights and then looking below and seeing everything I can see. So I'm gonna talk about this autism spectrum with you and share some experiences while I do it. This is a different way of looking at autism, where we're looking at all the parts instead of looking at the disability per se. So what are the parts of autism? Well, Matt Lowry, an autistic psychologist, lays it out this way. So he talks about proprioception. That's like, where is your body in space? Exteroception, how you sense the outside world. So this could be something like the smells around you. This could be something like an itchy tag. And that's kind of how I first started to notice my autism, was that things seemed really loud, or textures felt really rough. An environment felt too busy. Introception, I'm gonna go up here, is just that recognizing the internal state, like how are you feeling, and connecting that to why you're feeling that way. Emotional intensity. So a lot of autistic folks are told that they're emotionally intense. I think part of that is due to that feeling of the world being too much and feeling intense and that coming out. Communication differences. So one thing I do is that all day long somebody will say something, and in my head I will think of a song that goes with that word. I didn't really think of that as like a communication difference or a stim before, but it is. Communicating differently, like info dumps, sharing information, sharing about the things you love, but sort of in this more intense way, happens a lot. There's a lot of rejection sensitivity with autistic folk. And this happens because when you are communicating differently from others, you do experience more rejection. It definitely took me a while to kind of hack the code. I think this is why I went into communication, so I could figure out what are the parts of communication and how do I do this. We have executive functioning differences sometimes. Sometimes does anyone get really in the zone sometimes and they're doing some great work? That happens a lot with autistic folk. You get focused on one thing and you get in that zone. So the thing that I really like to talk about is spins. Those are those kind of special interest areas. And when somebody is allowed to just have their spin, do the things they love, they can do amazing things. My favorite story that goes with this is, okay, here's like an autistic culture chart. You'll see on there Questlove. Questlove is an autistic drummer. His story is that when he was younger, his parents took him to the pediatrician because all day long Questlove was spinning records. He was spinning records, listening to records, counting the beats. Questlove is now one of the most famous drummers and DJs in the world because the pediatrician said to his parents, if that is what he's loving, then let him do it more. Let him do what he loves. So Dan Aykroyd wrote, did Ghostbusters. He is autistic. His love was ghost hunting and like cops when he was a kid. So Greta Thunberg, she's super big on social justice and the environment. Satoshi Tajiri created Pokemon. He liked to collect bugs when he was younger, and he realized that kids in cities could not collect bugs. So he made a video game and a game where people could collect. So when we think about autism in terms of celebrating it, we can look at autistic culture and we can see that you get, like all brains, autistic brains have really cool stuff going on. There's people who are really into creativity and artistic expression, or world building like Pokemon, or linguistics, data gathering. Questlove also has like this incredible library of Black music. And pattern formation. That's a fun one. So we talked for a minute, and Miss Bettazzoni said something about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. A lot of the reasons how do you say this? So a lot of, when people are often thinking about autism, sometimes they're thinking about when an autistic person is not feeling good or is feeling dysregulated. So if you wake up every day in a world that's not made for you and you're not feeling safe, you might feel like you need to fight in that world, or flight, or you freeze, or fawn is just like kind of doing the things that other people are wanting of you. And your nervous system is on edge all the time. So it's hard for these positive things from here to come out because you're waiting for something to go wrong. So what a lot of people, all people, and autistic people are looking for is connection and belonging. So I love this sailboat metaphor. We need self-esteem, connection, and safety in order to have growth. So it's about getting from one place across the water to the next. And I didn't know this, right? Because I was immersed in this space for most of my life, masking. Masking is when you're trying to crack the code and when you're trying to look like everybody else so that you can belong. The thing is, you can't belong if you're not showing up as yourself. It's just not possible. And I was not showing up as myself. I didn't know how. I didn't know what that self even looked like in the world. So this guy says, everyone masks. And then she says, yes, but not everyone is the member of a group where their whole existence is pathologized through a lens of behavior and stigmatization, leading to marginalization, othering, exclusion, and a complete loss of self-identity. Are they? When you mask, you cannot be yourself. And that is harmful. You can't get across the water if you don't have self-esteem, if you don't love yourself, if you don't feel safe in the world. So, masking and the impact. This is also part of what helped me realize I was autistic, because some of these statistics have definitely applied for me. So, masking impacts self-esteem, like I just mentioned. It impacts connection and authentic relationships. You can't connect with people if you're not being yourself. I mean, and that being said, a lot of autistic people are feeling so unsafe that they can't even really connect with who they really are. That was the case for me. I didn't discover really who I was until my late 30s. It took so long. And yeah, I mean, my mom tells a story about when I was a kid, the masking was so pronounced that if I became friends with somebody new, without even knowing it, I would start talking like the other person. I didn't find my voice until I realized I was autistic, and then I was like, whoa, this is how I talk. So if you're pretending all the time, and don't even know you're pretending, it leads to burnout. And that's a psychological expression of trauma, right? Almost 8 in 10 autistic people experience a mental health problem. 66% of all autistic people experience suicidal ideation repeatedly. And the highest rate of suicide is for autistic people between 30 and 39 years. And I would say when my suicidal ideation was the highest was around 38. So that is, in my experience, accurate. And that is when I started making life changes. Making life changes. So anyway, one way to figure out who you are is to figure out how you communicate, why you want to communicate. I worked on that. What was I interested in? What did I want to talk to people about? What did I want to connect over? I also learned about my communication style. A lot of autistic people are bottom-up processors. That means they give you all the information and then you get to the main idea. Or they need lots of information in order to get to the main idea. And I built a sensory world. This is my living room where I get to have my hammock, my yoga ball, and I get to find a place where my nervous system can relax. The last thing is the other thing I learned about myself is a lot of autistic people are also also queer in some way. And so I was able to figure that out about myself and accept that about myself also. So that is the end. That was a lot of information, and thank you so much for letting me share with you. Do you have a question?
So like on that last slide,
Yeah.
another example could be like, for example, if you're trying to change your name because you're tired of everyone that you dislike calling you by that. Is that an example?
You know, that can be an example for some people, yeah. Yeah, I didn't change my name. Sometimes I like people to call me Rach instead of Rachel, but I kept it the same. But I did change to Mix from Miss Resgunas, because I use they, them pronouns. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Resgunas, for sharing that personal story about your life, helping us understand a little bit more about neurodivergence. Up next is Mr. Fifley. Okay, I'm gonna forewarn you, there's a little bit of a trigger warning. We are going to talk about suicide today, okay? A little bit.
A little, not a whole lot, but thank you everyone for being here. First off, I want to make sure that everybody knows I was one of the first teachers to volunteer to talk to students about their experiences years ago. Maybe like 10 years, I don't even know when the first time we did this. And I did it for a couple of years, but then I said, you know what? Other teachers wanted to tell their stories, and so I stepped away saying, let other people be heard. Let other people with different ideas, different stories, different thoughts be able to share with the school. You also have to understand, as I talk about what I'm going to talk about, this is emotionally and physically exhausting for me. For those of you who don't know me, I am an insulin-dependent diabetic, And one of the things that can cause my blood sugar levels to bounce all over the place is, well, emotion. And when I tell this story, I get emotional and I can start having some medical problems. I think the last time I told this story with any detail, it's probably been about 7 or 8 years. So, here we go. Like a number of my colleagues here at the school, I was born and raised here in Royal Oak. And my parents were active in making sure their kids were active. My sisters in choir and band, and me, well, I was in sports. And when I was young, the elementary schools actually had their own basketball teams, their own flag football teams, so we had our jerseys of all of our schools, played Little League baseball, soccer, all the above. Always had to keep active and busy. And from this and through this is where I started to meet a new group of friends. Friends because they were my competitors, my competition. And because I was pretty decent in sports, I had to guard or defend or play against the better athletes of the other elementary schools. And you get this sort of competition, but also a friendship. Across the line, you go, okay, I know you, you're the better one, so I'm the one that has to deal with you. And I made a lot of friends well before I ever got to high school through these different elementary schools. And one of those people is the gentleman I'm talking about today. His name was Mike Dunay. Now, Mike grew up and went to school at Oak Ridge. I grew up and went to school in an elementary school you've probably never heard of, Parker Elementary. Parker was on 13 Mile directly across from Beaumont, no longer there. But as we started to compete against each other, we formed this friendship. Something very strange happened before we even got to middle school. Mike and I ended up on the same Little League team, Edwards Furniture. And Mike's dad was the first base coach, so not only was he my good friend, but we also got to know each other's families. Well, when we got to middle school, and middle school for us was only 7th and 8th grade. Okay, you guys 6th through 8th, but 7th and 8th. When we got to junior high, we went to different junior highs. I went to Adams, Mike went to Churchill, which right now that is school district offices and all that. And again, we kept competing against each other, but we knew, 9th grade, we're gonna go to Kimball High School. We're finally gonna be classmates. Well, we got to Kimball, this building here, and we, now don't hate me because I have to say this, back then we had this wonderful thing called open lunch. Yeah, we were able to go off campus. Now, unfortunately, off campus, when you're 14 years old and you don't have a driver's license, there's nothing around here. We went across Lexington and ate every day at Lindell Ice Arena. Disgusting food. Anyone who works there, I apologize. Hopefully it's better. It was those hot dogs in the little aluminum bags that are like sweating when you try to eat it. The nachos, the cheese was hard as a rock, but the nacho chips were soft. Didn't matter. We were able to be on our own. Now this is a Friday, and nothing was planned over the weekend. And so We didn't have classes, but we had lunch. And Mike and I, we said, hey, well, see you later. And Mike, yep, I'll see you next time. That was the last time that Mike spoke to me, because Saturday night, he was killed by a drunk driver. And I say the word killed, he was murdered. Why do I use that term? The gentleman that ran Mike over had 3 previous DUI arrests, which meant by law, he did not have a license. But that wasn't going to stop him from having a good time. And what was even more disgusting, after he ran Mike over, when the police got to the accident scene, he told the police officers his 11-year-old daughter, who was in the car with him, was the one who was driving. You didn't even have the courage to own up to killing someone. You were going to blame it on your child. That's a special level of disgusting. I can tell you with all honesty, there's only one person in my life who I have truly hated, and that's that man. This was before the age of cell phones. So the only way that we had with communication was a landline, a phone within your house where people could call. I didn't get a call. So I walked in Monday morning not knowing what had happened to Mike. My locker was in front of Mr. Conrad's rooms, and looking back, you know, in the past and all of that, you become experts when you notice things without realizing it. It was very quiet that morning, and there were small groups of people who were crying, talking very quietly. Didn't realize that until later. Put my jacket away, put my books away, started walking down the hall. My best friend was a gentleman named Dave Roble. And Dave met me around Miss Johnson's room. And he said, hey, I've got to tell you something. Mike's gone. I said, gone? What are you talking about? He died. At first there was a little bit of a shock, but I started yelling at Dave. I said, that's the sickest joke. You can't talk about stuff like that. That is terrible. As Dave was breaking down, I looked over his right shoulder, and around the corner of the center hallway came Mike's older sister, Kathy. Kathy was a junior, varsity cheerleader. She was so overcome with grief that 2 of her friends had her arms over their shoulders, and they were kind of dragging her down the hall. I realized, oh my God, Mike's gone. I don't remember much about that week. Everything was a blur. I do know, and I do remember, I didn't cry publicly. Not because I was trying to be a tough guy. I was so overwhelmed by the emotions and the information, I was stunned. Other people and everyone, we all grieve in different ways. Some people were able to cry publicly. I cried before I went to sleep each night, because that's when my mind could slow down and I could try to process. knowing Mike's family at the time. The visitation was at the very large funeral home on Woodward, the huge white structure, the multi-level. And I lived basically in that backyard area. I could have walked, but because my folks knew them and because of my condition, we drove to the funeral home. It was packed. And the first moment was you enter into Mike's visitation area, and there were his parents. Well, in my mind, I went, okay, I'm going to be a young adult. I'm going to go up, I'm going to give his mother a hug, I'm going to shake his dad's hand, and I'm going to say something inspiring, something comforting, something that's going to let them know that I'm there for them. But my mind went blank. I stood there in front of Mr. and Mrs. Dunay and I just stammered. Mr. Dunay, having to have already dealt with so many of my peers acting basically the same way, put his hand on my shoulder, gave me a little hug and said, "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. I failed. I didn't do what I said I was going to do. Comfort them. Mike's family, Roman Catholic, so we have what I'll call a kneeler in front of the casket. The casket was closed. For us, we thought, well, in general terms, it was for emotional, because having seen a 15-year-old person, your friend, lying in a casket could be pretty rough. However, we didn't know, and unfortunately our minds go. Some stories started to go that there wasn't a whole lot left of Mike to recognize. And that's why the casket was closed. When I knelt down, well, as my other classmates were lining up, okay, I'm gonna make up for Mr. and Mrs. Dunay, I'm gonna do it right here, I'm gonna do the right thing. And I knelt down and my brain went blank again. What was I supposed to say? The God that I believed in? Take care of my friend? You didn't take care of Mike Saturday night. I was angry. I was upset. I didn't know how to react. The funeral was on Friday. They actually closed this high school down. Those of you that know Shrine of the Little Flower Parish, it was standing room only, meaning the upper balcony, everything. There were people everywhere. There were so many people in attendance, it wasn't worth having the building open here because most of the student population was there. The first time I cried was when the door to the hearse was closed after Mike's casket was put into the car. Because then I realized the only time I'm going to be able to see him is if I close my eyes and I remember. So on the steps of Shrine is where I lost it. His sister, as I said, when he died, she was a junior. The next year, Kathy helped to create the chapter of SAD here at the school. Now at the time, SAD was Students Against Drunk Driving, Now it's Students Against Destructive Decisions. We were the third high school in the state of Michigan to have a SAD chapter. When I became a teacher, I was the teacher sponsor for SAD for about a decade here, to honor Mike, to honor his past, to honor what happened. Those of you that don't know me, you all became my student the first time you walked into a Royal Oak School. I don't have to know you. I care about each and every one of you. You are my responsibility. You are part of my family. I guess I'm like the goofy uncle, but I am part of your family. If you think that someone doesn't care, you haven't met me yet. I kind of take it as a role. Some people are gonna look at me, well, you usually look at me, it's like, who's that old guy? I might be walking down the hallway and I'm just gonna say, hey, how you doing today? Because just by acknowledging you, that could be the difference between you having a good or a bad day. That's on me. That's why I'm here, among other things. Don't ever be afraid to, if you're having a bad day, you're feeling weak, we are all here together. Okay? I can certainly go through a lot more, but with the time that we have, how much time do we have?
We have about 10 minutes, I just want to make sure that if you time, if there were questions for.
Yeah. Any questions from anyone? And frankly, don't worry, nothing is off limits here. If you have a question to ask, please ask.
Questions for all three speakers. If you have a question, maybe it's on, hey, how did you figure out that coping skill that worked for you? How did you get through that trauma and make it out the other side with the knowledge that you have to think about it still often? Maybe something like that.
Well, you used to. Let's make sure that we understand one general concept here. The idea that eventually I was able to understand that unfortunately it was just a concept of terrible timing. Mike was in the wrong place at the wrong time. For me, I still have slight trigger effects, and here is one. Mike at the time, now remember, this is the Stone Age, way back when, he had this thing called the Walkman. So a little device and headphones. When he was run over, he had the headphones on. I still get nervous when I see any of you walk out of this building with your earbuds in. I know I don't run up to you and say, you should be wearing those, but it delays your reaction time because you are listening to something rather than maybe hearing something you don't see. It doesn't prevent you from reacting, but it slows down your reaction. And sometimes we're walking in the hall and I'll say, hey, good morning to you. And didn't even see me, and that's okay because you were paying attention to whatever you were listening to, and off you go. It still bothers me when I see, because you get into a common idea, oh, earbuds in, listening, but then you go out of the building and you don't think, oh yeah, I should probably take these off right now and be aware of what's going on. Okay? Any questions from anyone? convicted of vehicular manslaughter. He pled down to vehicular manslaughter. He was given a sentence of 12 to 15 years. Thankfully, the trial was a closed trial because you did not need a bunch of teenagers in the courtroom. But the only thing I remember, the quotation in the newspaper from Mr. Dune, "You told me my son's life is only worth 15 years." That's how many years he lived. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beckley. I just want to thank all of you teachers that came down with your classes and classes that came down, and you gave a ton of respect and listened to the teachers thoroughly and put your phones away. I really appreciate that, you guys. Hopefully you've learned that us teachers have a lot of things that we've gone through in our lives as well, and we can be great support systems, and that there are ways in which to manage your trauma. So seek help if you need it, okay? Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you signed up for a UMatter event. Please do not leave the LC until the bell rings.
Okay, good. I was like, there's a lot of stuff, and then I'm trying
I kept on looking directly in the camera. Hopefully my hair's not greasy. My hair's so greasy. I'm embracing it.